In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 specifications I look for when I'm buying a new camera for YouTube videos. Buying a new camera can feel quite daunting. Do you want to go full frame, or will APS-C do? Do you want to go mirrorless, or do I need a mirror? We're going to take this back to basics and I'm going to talk you through my top 5 things that I can't live without. But before we do that, let's just address APS-C versus full frame and mirrorless versus DSLR. I'm shooting on an APS-C size censored mirrorless camera, and this is a full frame mirrorless camera. The only difference between them is that the sensor in this camera is smaller than in this camera. So if you put the same lens on that camera and on this one, it would look wider. This is essentially capturing more information. And that's it. That's the only real difference. There are other slight differences, but that's the main one to take away. If you need a wider field of view, if you want to get more stuff in your shot, then full frame might be the way to go. If you're happier with a tighter frame, then APS-C camera is absolutely fine. This is the 16mm 1.4 lens from Sigma mounted on this camera, and it's about as wide as you can go without getting any distortion. So if you need a wider field of view than this, full frame is your answer. Next, let's talk mirrorless versus DSLR. A DSLR camera is one of those big black cameras that you see at sporting events or with the paparazzi chasing Justin Bieber around, and they're primarily designed for photography. In recent years, the video has been getting better and better, but the video is an afterthought. Their main focus is on photography. Mirrorless is the new kid on the block, even though it's been around for quite a long time, and it's where the industry is heading. With a mirrorless camera, the video and the photography come hand in hand. And on the whole, they're really good at doing both. So if your budget allows, I'd go down the mirrorless route. However, if you're on a tight budget, then you can get some amazing DSLR cameras for not very much money at all. The Canon 5D Mark II springs to mind, and you can get one of those for about £350. I know that because I've just bought one and I'm planning to make a whole video around that camera. It is 11 years old, but the footage that comes out of it is still incredible. It's 1080p, it's not 4K, but the footage does still stand up. Something you will have to bear in mind if you're going down the DSLR route is that the autofocus, especially on the older cameras, isn't great. Anything newer than, I'd say, the Canon 80D and the continuous autofocus is pretty good. It's still not as good as a mirrorless camera, in my opinion. Right, now we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the reason why we're all here. The 5 things that I look for in a camera for YouTube videos. Firstly, good continuous autofocus. Not just autofocus, but continuous autofocus. So I can move away from the camera, I can move back towards the camera, and my face is always in focus. This is especially important if you're going out and about shooting vlogs, going on adventures. You want decent autofocus, reliable autofocus that you don't have to worry about. There's little worse than getting your footage back on your computer and realizing that you're not in focus for most of the video. Next, let's talk about the microphone input. And this might seem stupid. You're like, of course it's going to have a microphone input if it shoots video. Well, that isn't always the case. There's a range of cameras called the Sony RX100s, which are amazing for shooting photography and video. But up until I think it's the Mark V or the Mark VI, they didn't have a microphone input. It's something that you see less and less of nowadays. Most cameras will have a microphone input on them if they shoot video, but just bear that in mind. Next, and still on ports, a headphone jack. Now this is a nice to have. It's not a deal breaker if my camera doesn't have a headphone jack, but it is really nice when I'm out filming if I want to check my audio levels. If I want to sit down and watch a clip back with some headphones on, I can make sure that my audio is all right. There's nothing more annoying in this world than getting back, editing your footage and being like, oh, footage looks amazing, audio is rubbish. If you're looking at the Sony lineup, I'm a Sony fanboy, then the full frame cameras generally do have a headphone jack. The APS-C cameras generally don't have a headphone jack. Come on, Sony, buck your ideas up. Next, let's talk about the flip out screen. For my first 2 years on YouTube, I was using the Sony a6300 cameras, which didn't have a flip out or flip up screen. And it's a nightmare. You can't check your audio levels, you can't check your exposure, your focus, your ISO, your aperture, your shutter speed. It's just a right pain. The first time I used a camera with a flip out screen, it was actually this one, the Sony a6400, the screen flips up and around the back, I was blown away. I was like, this makes life so much easier. I can make sure my frame is straight. I can make sure I'm stood in the right position. This is a must-have for any content creator. You need to be able to see what you're filming. There were so many occasions when I'd film something and start editing it, only to find out that I'd walked out the frame halfway through the shot because I didn't know what my frame looked like. Now I have the screen just above the camera, I can check it every now and again. I can glance up and see what my image is looking like. Last but not least, I look for a camera that can shoot 4K at 25p and 100 frames a second at HD. This way, when I'm doing a talking head like this, I can punch into my footage without losing any quality, and I can also shoot super sexy slow motion clips of anything that I might be talking about. But you might be thinking, I'm not really interested in 4K, I don't really understand it, what's the point? The world is changing and YouTube is changing, and the majority of videos that are going up online on YouTube nowadays are shot in 4K. And it is becoming the new standard. In a couple of years' time, I imagine all videos that go on YouTube will be in 4K. There are people out there today shooting videos in 8K. And if you're spending a lot of money on a camera, you want to make sure that you're future-proofing it so that it's ready for when you're ready to start shooting in 4K. This list is not the be-all and end-all of camera specifications. It doesn't matter if you've just bought a camera and it doesn't have one of these specs on it. These just make life easier to make YouTube videos. If you're deciding between a couple of different cameras, just go down the spec list and see which of the features that I've mentioned it has included. That might help you make a decision between which one you want to buy. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again really soon.